Thank you, Professor Longino. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation. As Dr. L said, my name is Dale Fredriks. I'm a first semester senior journalism major, writing and publishing emphasis. And today I'm going to be talking about journalism in a multimedia world. In the past, it used to be the case where if you said the word journalist, this is what people think of. You got a man in a suit with a loose tie, walking around the streets. He's got a notebook in one hand, a pen in the other, interviewing sources, and of course a cigarette in his mouth. After gathering up his sources and his information, he retreats back to the newsroom where he sits at a typewriter, types up a story, and then the next day goes out and does it all again. Nowadays, however, journalism has morphed into something almost unrecognizable from what it used to be. My first point is that the days of a journalist being solely a writer are over. Biola has embraced this from the word go and has been teaching it to me ever since I first stepped foot into the journalism program. From the beginning, I had to take classes in photography, digital skills, video and audio editing and recording, basic programming, as well as all the usual writing courses. All of this was to show that a journalist now can't just stick to one discipline. Yes, a journalist can choose their proficiency, but like I've chosen to be a writing emphasis, but in the professional world, just being one specific type of journalist is no longer desirable. The journalists of today have to be versatile, and my experience at Biola has helped me immensely in preparing for that task. Something that I have realized in the last year or so is that a multimedia journalist nowadays does not have to be an expert in all areas. Their responsibility is to be an expert in their field of choice and be proficient enough in the other areas to be able to work with the people in that field and occasionally do the jobs themselves if needed. This relieves a little bit of the pressure that I felt when learning all these aspects of journalism because I felt honestly overwhelmed by the amount of information that I was taking in. One particular example that sticks out to me is when we did the Code Academy course in Intro to Convergence. I have never been interested in being a programmer in any form or fashion, and to be clear, I'm still not, but that class gave me a foundation to be able to speak with coders I may eventually have to work with so that I can be informed on their profession. Speaking of Intro to Convergence, just yesterday, in fact, I had to edit the audio files for a different class's assignment, and I had to think back to Intro to Convergence for how to use Adobe Audition. Because of the training I got, I was able to remember how to edit it and make it sound good. This semester, I've been challenged by database journalism because I've never really considered data journalism as like an actual part of journalism before. I'd always kind of considered it as something that is lumped into journalism as a whole, that all journalists must be able to do. However, it's something that it's way more complicated than it seems because a writer has to have experience in the field, and that's a huge bonus for them if they're being hired down the road. Another example of class training coming in handy has been through my experience with the Chimes over the past 3 years, and specifically in my role as a sports editor this year. I've experienced the multimedia aspect of journalism in a few different ways. Specifically, I've had to take my own photos a few times and have needed to be able to communicate with our graphic designers about what needs to be changed on the pages that I'm overseeing. I particularly valued my time in Media Design Essentials, where we learned the Adobe Suite, which has helped me to be capable of using Adobe InDesign, the main software that Chimes uses for our designers. If our designers are busy with another page, then I am able to make the edit by myself since I have the background in the Adobe Suite. I also benefited from my time in Intro to Visual Media and Photojournalism 1, which I put to good use in one particular story I did, which was a feature story about my time at the Los Angeles International Auto Show. I had to take my own photos for the assignment, and that required me to know the basics of photography, such as composition, lighting, and creating visual interest. That brings me to another way that I see journalism being shifted, which is in my preferred career path, automotive journalism. To be competitive in that market, a person needs to be able to not only write reviews, but also take photos, videos, and be current on social media. Some popular examples of this can be found in car review channels on YouTube, such as these ones, the Smoking Tire, regular car reviews, and vehicle versions. The people behind these channels have made names for themselves by not only filming themselves and narrating video of them driving cars, and then only sometimes including a written component. One specific example from these is the channel Vehicle Virgins, which was run by a guy, or was started by a guy named Parker Nierenstein. When he started it, he was a student at the University of Michigan. It was started in order to give advice to people new to the automotive market, hence the name Vehicle Virgins, and has really taken off from there. His channel currently has well over 630,000 subscribers and has helped him to achieve his dream of buying his own Lamborghini. A success story like that is much more the exception rather than the rule, admittedly, but I was talking to Brian Douglas, who's the president of Western Automotive Journalists, and he said that a great way to break into the automotive journalism field is to start some sort of video blog / YouTube channel, which is something I fully intend to start doing, hopefully this summer, should time permit with internships and all that jazz. It's a great way to start a brand for yourself, and in the case of Vehicle Virgins, can turn into a very healthy revenue stream as well. But returning to my original point, all of this proves that a journalist in today's workplace must be multifaceted in their talents, which I'm grateful to Viola for teaching me the whole way through. My second main point is that though the role and responsibilities of a journalist have changed, they still must play by the same rules that they always have. A few of these largest elements of journalism, as given by Bill Kovach and Tom Rosenstiel in the Elements of Journalism, are that journalism's first obligation is to the truth, that its first loyalty is to the citizens, that it must strive to make the significant, interesting, and relevant, and that its practitioners must maintain an independence from those that they cover. The fact that journalism is obligated to the truth above all else should be immediately obvious, as everyone is looking for true information. A journalist finds themselves in a unique situation where they literally have the power to tell the public almost anything they want by spinning stories for their own benefit, taking photos that are ambiguous or one-sided, or failing to bring to light issues that the public needs to know. In the modern definition of a journalist, we have to be careful of all these aspects. In one sense, it's easy enough to verify facts when they're written down, but it's harder to know when an image has been edited or misrepresents what it's showing. These are things that writers must now think about, as they are expected to be photographers, editors, videographers, etc., as well as writers. The second element, that journalists must be loyal first to the citizens, is critical to all forms of journalism. We are supposed to be, quote, set apart from the people that we are covering so that we can present the truth in a way that provides the best information to the audience, not ourselves or any other party. Journalism must also make information relevant and interesting from the point of view of the reader or viewer. If we are unable to do that, no one is going to read or view our work, and thus it doesn't even matter if we're presenting the truth in a way that is meant to enrich the lives of the public. The final element I want to highlight is that journalists must remain independent from those they cover. This is similar to the second element, but even more explicitly demonstrates the fact that it is important to remember. Ethics are always going to be an issue in this fallen world, but by following these and other rules as journalists, we can do our jobs in a way that is as ethical as possible. I talked to Matt Late for a project in Philosophy and Ethics of Media last semester. Late is the city editor for the LA Times and also a member of their Standard and Practices Committee. And I asked him about how a new journalist should conduct themselves in order to remain ethical. He said, quote, "Just pretend your statements, your conduct, your actions are being recorded. And at the end of your story, someone's going to publish the way you went about doing your story. Is there anything that makes you feel uneasy about that? If there is, there might be an ethical issue." This applies to any and all forms of journalism, whether it be a visual thing such as photography or videography, written work, or the various forms of broadcasting. We talked in Photojournalism 1 about a case where a LA Times photographer named Brian Walsky photoshopped two images together in order to sensationalize the image. This is the image. The top shows the version of the image that the newspaper ran, while the bottom shows the two original photos that the photographer photoshopped together. Obviously, it's completely unethical, but it's very hard to catch, except the viewer happened to notice that one person happened to be in the photo twice. That man is right here, behind the soldier's knee, and he's also right here, in front of the soldier's knee. And one eagle-eyed viewer happened to catch that and the photographer was fired from the LA Times and was required to retract his photo. This example shows that ethics are an issue in all forms of journalism, not just writing, and we have to be on our guard to not commit errors or allow them to slip past us. My third and final key point is that a journalist must be prepared to do things they may not like in order to get where they want to go. The job market nowadays for college graduates seems increasingly bleak. More and more students are graduating from college and not being able to find jobs in their field immediately. Now, I don't really want to go into all the possible reasons for why that might be. I just want to highlight that it is the reality and journalists are no exception. Though I don't believe there will ever be a time that journalists are no longer needed, we still need to be prepared to start out in a role that is not necessarily our dream job. For example, I have completed one internship so far, which was last summer at a magazine in the Bay Area called Diablo Publications. And my job for the entire summer was fact-checking stories for future editions of the magazine. I would be given a story that someone else had written, and I had to read through the story, highlight all the different facts according to who I needed to contact in order to fact-check the story, then actually contact people and ask if the information in the story was accurate. This was the only thing I did for roughly 3 months, and being brutally honest, I hated it. But looking back on it, I know that it gives me experience and makes me more hireable, even though I hope I never have to do that as a job again. I had a similar experience when I wrote my article for the Chimes about the LA Auto Show that I mentioned earlier. My goal is to be someone who actually drives and then reviews the cars, which I was unable to do at the car show. However, because I enjoy learning facts and just generally being around cars, it was far from the worst thing that could have happened to me for that particular assignment. The part that was a little rougher was the fact that I also had to take all my own photos for the story, which I had never done before. I don't fool myself into believing that my pictures were excellent or maybe even good, but the fact that I did it gave me valuable experience into learning how to be a photographer and a writer. Another personal example I have is when I did the radio practicum class here last year. I chose to do that one because I really didn't want to do the broadcast practicum. Sorry, Professor Olson. I was very nervous before going into that class because I had no experience in radio or any other form of broadcast, and I was expected to host an hour-long radio show for about half the semester. I did make things a little harder on myself, admittedly, by choosing to do the show by myself, but a strange thing still happened to me. I actually kind of enjoyed doing it. I know that I don't want to end up doing radio as a career, but because of my experience in the class, I know how to do it and could do it in a pinch if needed. A similar thing happened to me this semester during sports journalism, as we had 2 assignments where we were supposed to give a live video shot like we were sideline reporters at a sports game. In this case, I did not enjoy doing it at all, but I got a taste of what it is like, which can help me down the road if for some reason, hopefully not, I end up doing a version of sideline reporting. During my time in the journalism department, I have certainly been pushed outside of my comfort zone, which I consider excellent training in order to make me proficient in the field of journalism as it is today. Summing it all up then, journalism is no longer just a writer's game. We must be equipped to function in many different disciplines, which will take a lot of work, granted. But just as important is finding your niche in the market and developing your skills accordingly. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to my presentation. I'd like to open it up to any questions you have.